I thought the worst thing that could happen was a bird pooping on it. I had no idea the real threat would come wearing a smug grin, holding a clipboard, and dragging along her adult son like a toddler at a toy store. It started with a dream, matte black, sleek, and low to the ground. My Lamborghini. It wasn't just a car, it was the end of a journey I'd been grinding through for years. Long hours, missed holidays, deadlines that swallowed weekends whole. Every time I pushed past my limits, I thought of that machine. And now, it was finally mine. The night I brought it home, I didn't even go inside. I just stood in the driveway, staring at it like it was art. My grandpa, who lives with me, came out and laughed. "Son, you look like a kid on Christmas morning." I didn't care how silly I looked. That car wasn't just metal and rubber. It was proof. Proof that hard work pays off. I should have known peace never lasts long in suburbia, especially with Karen around. Our HOA president. You know the type. Power tripping over flower beds and mailbox colors. Always talking about community standards while spying through her curtains like it's a military operation. And her son? Bryce. 24 going on 14. Pale, whiny, and always lurking somewhere behind her. That morning, they were on my doorstep at 7:15 a.m. May no knock. Just the doorbell, over and over. I opened the door, still groggy. There she stood, arms folded, lips pursed like she was smelling a dead rat. And behind her, Bryce, shifting from foot to foot like a kid about to ask if he could use the bathroom. Karen pointed down my driveway. "That," she said, as if the word tasted bitter, "is a problem." I blinked. "Excuse me?" Bryce leaned forward, his eyes locked on the Lamborghini like it was a dessert he wasn't allowed to eat. I'm not exaggerating. The guy was actually drooling a little. "It's my dream car," he said, wiping his mouth. "Seeing it every day, that triggers my depression." I looked for a hidden camera. I had to be on some prank show. But Karen's face was stone serious. As president of the HOA, I must prioritize the emotional well-being of our residents, she said like she was reading from a policy manual. "Therefore, we propose a solution. Bryce will co-own the Lamborghini with you." I stared at her, waiting for the punchline, but no laugh came. "You can't be serious," I said. "Oh, I'm perfectly serious," she replied. "We'll even write a new clause in the HOA bylaws. It's about community morale. Think of it as public service." Bryce grinned, that wide, greedy grin of a man-child who just got handed something he never earned. He actually took a step toward the car, arm outstretched like he was about to pet it. I didn't even feel the rage rising. It just was. This wasn't about the car anymore. This was about everything my grandpa taught me. You work for what you want. You protect what's yours. Those words weren't just advice. They were my code. And I was watching two people try to spit on it. I took a deep breath, my fists clenched so tight they ached. "No," I said, and in that moment I didn't realize it yet. But I'd just lit the fuse on a war. Not over a Lamborghini, not even over property rights, but over something far more dangerous. Entitlement. And how far some people will go when they think they deserve what you've earned. I thought no would be enough. But with people like Karen and Bryce, no is just the start of their plan B. They didn't argue, not then. They just stared, like I had failed a test I didn't know I was taking. Karen's lips thinned into a straight, bitter line. Bryce pouted like a toddler denied dessert. Then they left. No shouting, no threats. Just a weird little smirk from Karen as she turned away. A nod between them. And I should have known right then. That smirk wasn't surrender. It was strategy. That night I moved the car into the garage, locked it, double-checked the alarm, call it paranoia, call it instinct. I just had a bad feeling. And the next morning, I was right. There was a fresh, jagged scar running across the driver's side door. A long, angry line. Someone had taken a key, or maybe a screwdriver, and dragged it with full force across the matte black paint. I stood there, staring at it, my stomach in my shoes. This wasn't just vandalism. This was personal, and it had Bryce written all over it. My hands were fists before I realized it. Fury surged up through my chest like a furnace, not just because of the scratch, but because of what it meant. They didn't just want to take what was mine. They wanted to break it. I could already hear my grandpa's voice echoing in my head. Rotten apples, son. Some folks, you give 'em an inch, they take a mile and bill you for the road. But this was more than a bad apple. This was an infestation, and then came the letters. Crisp white envelopes with the HOA logo. Each one more absurd than the last. Excessive vehicle noise. Improper driveway storage. Violation of community visual harmony. The car was inside the garage. It hadn't moved in 2 days. I'd barely even started it. But still, the complaints piled up, each signed by Karen in her stiff, slanted handwriting that always looked like it had been written by someone clenching a ruler between their teeth. I tried talking to neighbors. Some nodded sympathetically, but kept their eyes low. Karen had sent them warnings before, too. A fence an inch too high. A flower bed with non-native plants. She ruled by silence, the kind that comes from fear, not respect. My Uncle Mitch had a different solution, though. "You gotta fight fire with fire," he shouted over the phone. "I know a guy who knows a guy who can get us some very aggressive geese. You let him loose on her lawn, problem solved." I thanked him, politely declined, but part of me, the part that was tired and angry, did imagine it for a moment. A wild, honking revenge, wings flapping, Karen diving for cover in her prized rose garden. But I wasn't going to stoop to that level. I needed proof. That's when I went to the HOA meeting. I brought the letters. I brought photos of the scratched paint. I spoke calmly, clearly. I asked for an investigation. Karen just smiled. "Do you have proof, Mr. Henderson?" she said, her voice all sweet poison. "Proof of who damaged your vehicle? Proof these complaints are invalid? We have procedures here, rules." Bryce sat beside her, smug, like he'd won something. And the rest of the board? Silent. Eyes on. The floor. Just like my neighbors, afraid to speak, afraid to challenge her. I realized I was playing checkers while Karen was playing chess, and she'd already rigged the board, but they'd made one mistake. They thought they could bully me into silence. They didn't know how stubborn I could be. They didn't know I wasn't just fighting for my car. I was fighting for my dignity, for every ounce of sweat I poured into my life, for every lesson my grandpa drilled into my bones. And if they thought this was over, they were about to learn something the hard way. I don't lose what I work to earn. Not without a war. I was at work, trying to focus on spreadsheets, but all I could think about was the scratch on my car, and that smug look on Karen's face. Then my phone buzzed. It was a text from my grandpa. "Tow truck here. Karen is with them. Says it's for the black car." My blood went cold. Tow truck? For my Lamborghini? I called him instantly. He sounded out of breath, angry. They say it's abandoned, he said. She's got some kind of paper. Looks official. Abandoned. In my own driveway. This wasn't just harassment now. This was theft disguised in rules and paperwork. I grabbed my keys and bolted. The drive home was a blur. Red lights turned into suggestions. Every minute felt like a punch to the chest. And when I pulled up to the house, my worst fear was alive and parked in front of me. A massive tow truck was backed up to the driveway. The driver, a bored-looking guy in a stained shirt, was lowering the hook. Karen stood beside him, arms folded, triumphant. And Bryce, he was grinning, bouncing on his toes like it was Christmas morning. I slammed the brakes, jumped out. "What the hell is going on?" I shouted. Karen turned to me like I was late to a meeting she'd scheduled without telling me. "Oh, Mr. Henderson," she said sweetly. "We're just removing an abandoned vehicle as per HOA regulations." She waved a paper, looked official, stamps, signatures. But something felt off. "It was driven yesterday," I yelled. "It's not abandoned. This is illegal." The tow truck driver shrugged. "Got a work order. Says tow it, I tow it." He started the hook. "You touch that car," I said, stepping between him and the Lamborghini, "and you'll be dealing with more than a lawsuit. This paper is fraudulent. You better be damn sure you want to be part of this." A pause. Then, chaos arrived. On a lawnmower. Uncle Mitch, he came barreling down the street on his ancient riding mower, wearing a plastic Viking helmet, swinging a garden rake like a lance. "Unhand that horseless chariot, villains!" He bellowed, circling the tow truck like a medieval knight with a mechanical steed. Everyone froze, even Karen blinked. "You'll have to get through me and Bessie," Mitch declared, patting the lawn mower like it was a war horse. "That car is a neighborhood treasure. You can't just tow treasures. That's against treasure law." Karen, flustered, tried to shoo him away from her rose bushes, and that's when I saw it, the paper in her hand. The formatting was off. The seal wasn't sharp. The font, wrong, blurry, too clean. I worked in contracts for years. I could spot a fake in a heartbeat. My grandpa came down the porch steps slowly. "What is it, son?" "This order," I whispered. "It's fake. Totally fake." And that's when it hit me. Karen hadn't just bent the rules. She forged a city document. This wasn't HOA harassment anymore. This was a crime. And if she was willing to go this far, lie, forge, tow a man's car under false pretense, what else was she capable of? I turned back to Karen. "You really want to play this game?" I said, loud enough for the driver to hear. "Then you better be ready to prove that paper is real. Because if it's not, I will bury you in court." The tow truck driver looked at the paper again, then at me, then back at Karen. He hesitated. She saw it too. Her smirk faltered, just for a moment, but that moment was enough. That night, I made a decision. No more reacting. It was time to get proactive. I ordered cameras, hidden, high quality, night vision, wide angle, all aimed at the driveway, the yard, and across the street toward Karen's house. And as I mounted the last one, screwed it tight into place beneath the eaves, a thought chilled me. If Karen could fake an order to tow my car, what else was she hiding? What if this wasn't just about me? What if this whole neighborhood had been hers to exploit, and no one ever bothered to look? The scratch on my car was ugly, but I was about to uncover something far uglier. The first few days after the fake tow order, nothing happened. No more complaints, no new scratches, No midnight drama. Karen passed my house each morning with her nose higher than usual. Bryce moped in their front yard like he'd been grounded from life. And still, I waited. I watched. Because silence from people like Karen isn't peace. It's planning. And I wasn't about to be caught off guard again. That's when it happened. 2 a.m. My phone buzzed. Motion detected in the driveway. My heart pounded. I grabbed the phone, opened the camera app, and there he was. Bryce, creeping through my yard like a raccoon with a grudge. Hoodie up, shoulders hunched, glancing around like he was starring in the world's worst spy movie. Then he pulled something. From his pocket, a can of spray paint. He shook it, stepped toward the garage, and stared at the car. I hovered my thumb over the panic button. Lights, sirens, the works. But I didn't press it. Not yet. I needed him caught. No denials. No finger-pointing. Just truth. Undeniable, high-definition truth. Bryce stood there, longer than I expected, looking at the car, reaching a hand out, not to paint it, but almost to touch it. Gently, like it was something sacred. His mouth moved, like he was talking to it, or to himself. And for just a second, I saw something different. Not a brat. Not a vandal. Just a lost, tired kid. Confused, hollow. Then it was gone. He raised the can and sprayed a jagged, ugly, yellow line across the hood. That was it. I hit the alarm. The lights blasted on. The siren screamed into the night. Bryce screamed too. A high, pathetic yelp as he dropped the can and tripped over his own feet, sprinting back to his house like a spooked cartoon. I had him, dead to rights. But what caught my eye next chilled me even more. On another feed, one that looked across the street, a car had pulled up beside Karen's house. Black sedan, lights off. A figure stepped out. Karen, or someone like her, stepped outside to meet them. They exchanged something. A briefcase, an envelope. It was quick, quiet, intentional. It had nothing to do with my car. But everything about it felt wrong. Who meets at 2 a.m. with briefcases? And what was Karen doing really while her son vandalized my property? The next morning, I stared at the yellow streak on the Lamborghini. My stomach turned. But I didn't feel like calling the cops. Not yet. Because this wasn't just about spray paint anymore. This was about secrets. I kept reviewing the footage. Frame by frame. Zooming, enhancing. That briefcase exchange nagged at me like a splinter in the brain. Bryce had vandalized my car. Yes. But Karen, she was operating on a whole other level. I knew that if I reported Bryce now, I'd get my justice. Charges, public shaming. HOA embarrassment. But I also knew Karen would bury whatever she was really doing. This neighborhood didn't just need Bryce exposed. It needed her exposed. My grandpa watched as I explained everything that morning. He just nodded. Calm and slow. Sometimes, he said, when you see smoke, you don't just call the fire department. You find the fire, especially if it's not done burning yet. And this fire, it was just warming up. There's a moment in every story, a line you cross, where it stops being about what was done to you and starts becoming about what you're going to do about it. That was the night I crossed mine. I didn't call the police about Bryce. Not yet. I saved the footage. every frame of him spray painting my hood and running like a cartoon villain in retreat. But I didn't use it, because something about that briefcase felt bigger. And Bryce didn't seem like the mastermind anymore. He looked like a puppet, nervous, jumpy, conflicted. I needed to know who was pulling the strings, so I started watching. Not obsessively. Not at first. Just casual observations, notes, patterns. When Karen left, who visited? When lights turned on and off. It felt wrong, at first, like I'd become the neighborhood creep. But then I'd look at my car, still wearing that ugly yellow scar, and the guilt would vanish. She had escalated. Now, so would I. A few days later, Karen left her house in a hurry. No Bryce. No clipboard, just a stack of thick files tucked under her arm. She tossed them in her trunk, checked her hair in the mirror, and drove off, and I followed. Not in the Lamborghini, obviously. I took my old pickup, rusted, unassuming, the kind of vehicle no one remembers passing. She drove clear across town, to a grimy little office park with a half-broken sign, Acme Holdings, LLC. I parked across the street. Watched as she disappeared inside. I waited. 1 hour, 2. When she finally emerged, the files were gone. I went home and dug in. Deep. I searched every public business record I could access. Acme Holdings was barely real. No website. Registered. To a P.O. box. And its listed officers? Names I didn't recognize. Probably figureheads. But after hours of digging, I found a single name buried in an old permit record. A man listed as a minor shareholder. That same man had once been paid, years ago, as a contractor for our HOA. Suddenly, things started clicking into place. Karen had steered HOA business to this company, a company she had secret ties. To that briefcase? That wasn't HOA business, that was her business. And Acme Holdings? It was her shell, her money funnel. I felt sick. It wasn't just my car she'd targeted. She'd used all of us, the entire neighborhood, like her personal ATM. Every overbilled landscaping project, every suspicious repaving job, every consulting fee no one understood in the HOA budget. It was all there, hidden in plain sight. And worst of all, Bryce might have been another casualty, more victim than villain, because as I rewatched that 2 a.m. footage, something new caught my eye, a flash, in the living room window, a lamp. A silhouette, Karen, clearly visible, handing something small to Bryce, a pill. He took it reluctantly, slumped onto the couch, and minutes later, she left for the exchange. That wasn't medicine. That was sedation, control, manipulation, maybe even worse. My hands were shaking, not out of anger, but out of realization. This wasn't petty power tripping anymore. This wasn't about a car, or vandalism, or even forged tow orders. This was about abuse of power, in the truest, darkest sense. Karen wasn't just corrupt, she was dangerous. My grandpa listened quietly that night as I laid it all out. She's drugging her own son, I said. Stealing from the HOA, forging city documents, and God knows what else. He didn't say much, just, then I guess it's time to stop collecting evidence. I looked at him. You saying, go to the cops? He shook his head. I'm saying it's time the neighborhood knows what's been living in its own house. And he was right, because Karen had built her power on one thing: silence, fear. And the moment that broke, The whole house of cards would collapse. But I wasn't done gathering yet, not just because I wanted her gone, but because I wanted her to fall so hard she'd never get up again. Sometimes, justice isn't about revenge. It's about exposure, yanking the curtain back in front of a crowd and showing the monster they've been living beside all along. The week before the HOA general meeting, I worked like a man possessed. Not fueled by rage anymore, that had burned off. What was left was something colder, sharper. Purpose. I made copies of everything, the invoices from Acme Holdings, fake charges, vague descriptions, the overbilled landscaping work. I matched them against HOA records from the past 2 years. Every signature led back to Karen. Every cent led away from the neighborhood. Then came the video footage. I clipped everything down to what mattered most. Bryce spray painting my Lamborghini. The fake tow truck confrontation. Karen handing Bryce the pill. The 2 a.m. exchange with the black sedan. I even printed still frames, labeled them, laid everything out like a trial exhibit. The night before the meeting, I barely slept. I kept hearing my grandpa's voice. Truth has a way of shining through, even in the murkiest water. And this water, it was black with lies. I got to the clubhouse early, set up the projector, loaded the USB. I wasn't going to rant. I wasn't going to accuse. I was going to reveal. When people arrived, there was already a buzz in the air, like everyone felt something big was about to happen. Karen sat at the head of the board table, prim and smug, as always. Beside her was her hand-picked replacement for the board seat that had just opened up. A man who looked like he'd lost a bet just by showing up. Bryce sat in the back, pale, quiet, hands folded in his lap, his usual smugness gone. The meeting began like any other. Minutes, budgets, approval of garden projects. Then came new business. I stood up. Before we move on, I said, I have something important to share with the homeowners. Karen's smile didn't fade, but her eyes flicked. Quick, nervous. Mr. Henderson, we've already... This isn't about me, Karen, I said. This is about all of us. That froze the room. I took a deep breath. Then I hit play. First up, the vandalism. Bryce, caught red-handed at 2 a.m., painting the hood of my Lamborghini. Gasps, whispers. Karen turned bright red. She stood up. That footage was taken illegally. In my own driveway, I snapped. Security footage. Legal. Yours. Then the fake tow order. I passed around a copy. I've confirmed with the city. This document does not exist in any official record. Karen used it to authorize a tow truck to remove my vehicle, under false pretenses. Then, the financial records. I projected. The HOA budget on screen, side by side with invoices from Acme Holdings. This company, supposedly providing services to our HOA, is linked to Karen through a silent ownership structure. People leaned forward. Some covered their mouths. Others shook their heads. Then came the briefcase footage. The exchange outside Karen's house. Grainy, but damning. This isn't HOA business. This is a personal deal happening at 2 a.m. in front of Karen's house, the same night Bryce vandalized my car. Karen tried to interrupt again, but now, no one wanted to hear her. Even her usual board allies were silent. One actually stood up and moved his chair away from her, and then came the hardest part. I played the footage of Bryce, the pill. Just a few seconds. Enough to show the interaction, the resistance, the slumped body. I didn't narrate it, didn't, accuse, I just let it sit. The silence that followed was the loudest moment of my life. Bryce started to cry, quietly, into his hands. He didn't run, he didn't shout, he just wept. And Karen, she finally broke. "You don't understand," she screamed, standing up. "You people never understand what it takes to hold this place together. I did what I had to do." She pointed at me, trembling. "He provoked this. With his flashy car and his smug face and his grandfather's—" "Enough," someone said softly, a neighbor. Then another stood, then a third. It spread, a wave of resistance that cracked her hold in real time. The board president, her own appointee, stood and said, "We need to suspend this meeting and call a special vote." And just like that, her empire began to crumble. She turned, frantic, looked for support, found none. Karen, queen of the cul-de-sac, finally realizing that fear doesn't last forever. But truth, that's permanent. Karen didn't leave the room. She was escorted out by police officers. 2 of the homeowners had called them before the meeting even ended. One had filmed the entire presentation on their phone. By the time the officers arrived, Karen was already collapsing in on herself. Red-faced, stammering, waving her arms like a drowning swimmer clinging to lies. She tried to talk her way out, tried blaming misunderstandings, misfiled paperwork, ungrateful neighbors. But no one was listening anymore. She was no longer the voice of the HOA. She was just noise. They took her away in handcuffs. I watched the metal slide over her wrists, the same wrists that once signed off on every fake invoice, every bogus violation, every forged order. She didn't look at me as she passed, but Bryce did. He didn't look angry. He looked free. He sat there trembling, wiping his face, and said nothing. And somehow, that silence hit harder than any shouting ever could. In the days that followed, the story exploded. Karen was charged with multiple counts of fraud, forgery, misuse of HOA funds, and contributing to the delinquency of a minor. The police were investigating her ties to Acme Holdings, the tow truck company, and several other shell businesses they now suspected were tied to similar scams in nearby communities. She wasn't just a neighborhood tyrant, she was a networked one. The tow truck driver, S., cut a deal fast. He confessed that Karen had been paying him under the table to tow vehicles under false pretenses, sometimes even selling them off through shady backdoor auctions. Abandoned vehicles, elderly residents who were slow to respond, people who didn't fight back. A pattern, a system, one she'd designed like a spider web from behind a picket fence. And somehow, despite all that, the most gut-wrenching detail wasn't in the crimes, it was in the pill. Bryce hadn't just been a spoiled brat. He'd been manipulated, medicated, used like a tool to protect Karen's image. The footage I provided, along with Karen's own financial records, painted a dark, ugly picture. Prosecutors were investigating her for possible medical abuse. No one knew exactly what she'd given him, but it didn't matter. What mattered was why. Control, the same way she controlled everything else. The HOA was thrown into chaos, but it was a healing kind of chaos. An interim board was appointed. A full audit was launched. Every file, every contract, every HOA dollar was dragged into the light. And for the first time in years, people started talking to each other again, like neighbors, not inmates. My grandpa, the man who taught me everything about work, pride, and standing your ground, joined the new review committee. He said, "If we're rebuilding, let's do it with common sense, not Karen sense." Uncle Mitch? He declared himself Chief of Neighborhood Morale. His first order of business? A weekly lawn chair night, complete with lemonade, bad, jokes, and a most creative mailbox contest. People showed up, not because they were scared, but because they wanted to. As for Bryce, he wasn't charged criminally, not fully. Given the footage, the medical questions, and his obvious emotional state, the court ordered him into therapy, community service, and a long evaluation process. He was also ordered to personally clean the yellow paint off my Lamborghini, supervised, of course. Watching him scrub away that damage, slowly, quietly, tears streaming down his cheeks. I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt tired and a little sorry because no one raised a monster. In that house, they raised a prisoner, and Karen, she was the warden. That day, as Bryce packed up his supplies and turned to leave, he paused. He didn't say sorry, not with words. He just looked at me, eyes red, lips trembling, and nodded. That was enough. This wasn't about revenge anymore. This was about cleaning up something that had been rotting for far too long. Not just my car, but my community. When the dust finally settled, what was left wasn't destruction. It was clarity. Karen's downfall wasn't just a victory for me, or for my car, or my ego. It was something bigger, something deeper. It was a warning shot to every silent tyrant who thought power came from fear, and a reminder to the quiet ones that their voices still matter. The neighborhood didn't fall apart. It woke up. A full audit recovered thousands of dollars, HOA funds that had been quietly siphoned into Karen's network of fake companies, landscaping contracts that never happened, consulting fees for advice no one asked for, payments signed by Karen, justified with empty reports and vague memos. All of it undone. The new board, real neighbors, not hand-picked cronies, rewrote dozens of bylaws. No more citations for flower pots being the wrong shade of terracotta. No more measuring grass with rulers. No more late-night letters, threats, or fines for mailbox designs. We replaced all of it with something simpler, trust and accountability. We started seeing each other again, not just as names on envelopes, but as people with gardens, families, flaws, stories. Even Bryce. He kept to himself after everything. His therapy sessions became regular. His community service stretched far beyond my Lamborghini. He cleaned graffiti in 3 different neighborhoods, repainted fences, fixed signs, worked in silence, always with his head down like he was trying to scrub away more than just paint. And maybe he was. I'd see him sometimes, walking past my driveway, hands in his hoodie pocket, eyes avoiding the car like it still haunted him. But one afternoon he stopped. "Hey," he said, barely above a whisper. I looked up. He nodded at the Lamborghini, then at me. "I'm trying," he said. I didn't say anything, just nodded back. Because sometimes the loudest forgiveness is the one you never speak out loud. Karen, meanwhile, disappeared into the legal system, facing charges for fraud, forgery, financial misconduct, and potentially even medical abuse. Her trial was pending. Her mugshot made the rounds on local news, and not even her stiffest hairstyle could save her from that level of humiliation. The HOA meetings changed, too. No more power plays, no more staged decisions, Now they were human. People laughed, argued, voted, listened. My grandpa became the neighborhood's moral compass, steady, old school, and unshakably kind. Uncle Mitch still showed up in bizarre costumes. Last week it was a cape and a foam sword. Said he was protecting us from property tax goblins. No one had the heart to stop him. He was the morale committee after all. And me? I repainted. The Lamborghini, installed a state-of-the-art security system, and then added a sign. Not big, not flashy, just a small polite plaque next to where it sat. This car was earned through hard work. If you want one, try it yourself. Some neighbors smiled when they read it, some shook their heads, but everyone understood, because it wasn't just about the car. It was about what it represented. A life built from nothing, sacrifices no one else saw, and the resolve to protect it, not with fists or fury, but with truth. Looking back, I realized something. Real justice? It isn't loud. It doesn't always look like victory. Sometimes it looks like a quiet neighborhood breathing again after years of silent fear. Sometimes it looks like a boy cleaning off the very car he once tried to ruin. Sometimes it's a grandfather's wisdom, a lawnmower Viking, and a bunch of neighbors finally remembering what community means. And sometimes it all starts with a matte black Lamborghini, parked in the wrong driveway on the wrong block, at exactly the right time.